What's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
And I'm Jason.
And you're listening to Liquid Carnage. Buddy, so before we get started today, we should point out a pre-taping discussion that we had that you are, in fact, in Vegas for the week on a working vacation.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm definitely not. I'm not in Arizona. I am in Las Vegas for the week. We are working remotely, and everything seems to be going okay. However, I am noticing that some of the finer accoutrements of working in an office at home or working in an office in the office, we do not have. Currently, my desk is set up on the dresser in the bedroom of the apartment.
We should also point out that you do not have the editing equipment for our show. So if you're listening to this, unless it's a miracle, chances are it's Sunday night and or Monday. So we do apologize if there are any inconveniences ahead of time. But as you know, life does go on. We roll with the punches. And as long as you have a good time on your vacation and everybody enjoys the show, I don't care when you listen to it, as long as you listen to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely, like I said, I've been in the hotel now for 2 days. So I haven't really seen a lot of Las Vegas or anything like that. But it's been an experience, and we're testing it out because we have a timeshare too that a lot of times we can't find a place to go to use it. And so we thought, well, maybe what we would do is, because we don't have a lot of vacation days, if we ever need to do this again, see how it works and then if it works out, we can find another location like, I don't know, Nashville or someplace else and do the same thing, like work on the road and try it. So we're giving it a good go here.
Well, that's good. And just so I can also take one for the Kurtzworth team, if you guys ever have an issue unloading some of that sweet timeshare time, I'm sure I can help you unload a few days at a few exotic locations if it came down to it.
Okay, well then now I feel much better that we have alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, we can compensate you for your gift.
Oh, yeah, right.
But if you guys ever run into a point where you can't use it, I'm sure the Liquid Carnage fans would love to hear me on location somewhere occasionally too.
Frankly, if I had the editing computer, people wouldn't even have known that we were not doing what we normally do.
Oh, yeah, it would have been a different conversation altogether.
Yeah,
different conversation altogether.
Yeah, so exactly. So, anyway, so that's it's a little different, but we're making it work.
Years are all about rolling with the punches.
That's right.
Every day we wake up, it's a different world we're living in, and it's a little bit darker some days and a little bit brighter other days. I don't know if everyone noticed that we're not going to get into a political discussion today because we have some other stuff we want to talk about. But have you been watching the news on this Afghanistan stuff?
I have been watching the news, and the only thing I will say is that wow, we sure guessed that one wrong, didn't we?
Yeah. Who knew?
Who knew that within 2 days of us leaving, that 2 weeks of us leaving, that the whole country would be taken over again?
Yeah, I color me shocked. I'm just saying. I tell you, the one thing I do find interesting about this is when you look at the political right side of our country, they are screaming afoul of this and how everything went bad and this could have been handled so much better. And while I do agree with that, they're not pointing out that we are in fact just following through with the plan from the previous administration, that this is what they wanted to do. But my point to this comment is everyone that is screaming afoul about what's happening in Afghanistan, we have to open up our borders to let them in for asylum, are the same people complaining about a wall that needs to be built down in Mexico and not letting those people in. So I guess my point to the story is you can't have your cake and eat it too. Either we let people in because of their situations or we don't.
Well, I was talking to my mom who had lived through the Vietnam conflict, and she said this is just as bad as it was back then. I mean, it was, people were screaming and yelling because, we're losing this war, we're leaving Vietnam. And yet other people are saying that we shouldn't even have even been there. And, this should have happened, years earlier than it did. And just, I think when you put yourself in a place for as long as we've been in Afghanistan, I don't know if there is a clean way to get out of it.
No,
Uh,
I don't
and
think there
and
is either.
and when you think that the fact that part of your assumptions are we've brought stability to the region, we've established a government that can now take care of itself, and how easily they just laid down their weapons and said, "Okay, come on through." I mean, what else could we do? I mean,
Yeah.
we made some assumptions that were wrong, I think. But
What they say,
when
like
the government is just basically letting the Taliban just take over and not even fighting them, then that was not what we spent 20 years training either.
yeah, I believe they said there's something like 300,000 Afghani soldiers that just laid down their arms and let the Taliban do this. So
So as far as I'm
that
concerned, I don't know if there was a way to do it, but I do say that the idea was the right idea. We didn't need to be there anymore. If they're not even willing to fight for themselves, then we certainly don't need to be fighting for them.
no, I agree completely, and the fact that, like I mentioned, the amount of soldiers that were there that apparently dropped their arms, backroom deals were made that we were not privy to that to make this happen. So
Sure, yeah. So so yeah, I've only been following enough to just kind of say it was a an ugly situation, and when you consider the billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been spent, um, that chances are we're not going to be spending those billions and billions of dollars. We can put those to other things. So
yeah,
maybe we can find a silver lining. But yeah, it's definitely not a pretty situation, that's for sure. And I don't envy either side. I mean, if the previous administration had tried it, I firmly believe the previous administration probably didn't try it because they knew that the powers that be over there, it it wasn't attainable. So it's like a band-aid. You just got to rip it off, baby.
yep,
So
yep. It's and I will as we end this subject and move on to the next one. I will quote another famous podcaster, uh, show, um, T's and P's. As long as someone posts thoughts and prayers, we can just say T's and P's to those in Afghanistan. Um, I just wish this was a better situation.
I will say this too. I find that every situation that I've come into, and I've almost been here 50 years now on this planet, that we think that the worst thing is going to happen, and somehow, most of the time, it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. It's not as good as we think it could be, but it's not as bad as we think it's going to be.
So you're
Like
saying like
something,
we overplay things in our head, we overhype or underhype, and
I just think that we sometimes our worst fears aren't really realized.
yeah, that makes
I mean,
sense.
sometimes our worst fears aren't realized, and is there a change? Is there bad things that happen? Yes, but they're not as bad as sometimes our minds will paint them out to be. And so, I'm hoping that this situation, it sounds like they're saying that the Taliban is different now than they were before,
Kids try to be more
and
progressive. They're more
they're
moderate.
trying to be, they don't want to be like they were before. It's been 20 years, so things have changed. I don't know. I'm I'm like you. It was an ugly situation, but at some point, I think as we look back, we're going to be glad that it finally happened. We're going to be glad it finally happened. So,
Yeah, it's
but
just a shame.
oh
Anyway,
gosh, yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. So we're not going to talk about that anymore. But I wanted to give a shout out to one of our listeners, Dave Watson. He has moved down to Phoenix, and so we were hanging out with him, doing some karaoke at a dive bar in Phoenix, which I didn't even think Scottsdale had dive bars, but he found one in Scottsdale that was pretty badass. And
The rest of us call those regular bars, what Scott still calls dive bars.
yeah. This would be. It was kind of it kind of reminded me of is the bowling alley, the Kingman
Mm-hmm.
Bowling Alley, but it was a little bit bigger and it was pretty good. We liked it, but anyways, when we got done, Dave knows that I like to read, so he gave me a book that I in a million years would never have chosen to read at all, and it was basically an autobiography of the lead guitarist Slash from Guns N' Roses.
One of my favorite musicians.
Okay. It's one of these books that Scott I would never have even considered reading. Even Noreen said, "You're going to read that?" I go, "Well, Dave gave it to me, and he said it was pretty good." And so I started reading it, and it's a very real, true account of his life, uh, through the days, leading up to Guns N' Roses. And then, and as I'm reading the story, I mean, it's basically what you would imagine sex, drugs, rock and roll would look like, but
Uh-huh.
from the dark side, not like the glamorous, oh, everything's perfect and wonderful, but like he's very particular about, um, you know, his drug use, and he, I guess he started using drugs at like 12 years old. He drinking and drugs. He dropped out of school. I guess he was homeless a lot of the time because his mom was traveling. So he was basically living by himself, and he didn't want to hang out by himself. So he'd hang out with his BMX and skateboard types, and I guess he was a kleptomaniac as a young man. So he's got all these things that, when you say a story like, okay, you're going to talk about a kid who started doing drugs, having sex early, never went to school, never graduated. 99 times out of 100, you're going to say that kid probably has no life and is totally jacked up.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking that, why, when we think about this same kid, his story turned out that he became one of the probably top guitarists in rock and roll. That's arguable, obviously, but I mean, he's one of the top guitarists, and became a very successful musician because all he wanted to focus on his whole young life was drugs and guitar. And that's it. That's all he did.
Well, yeah,
And
if
it,
those are the options you want to go through and you drop out of school to do it, then I guess you got to chase your dreams.
well, and when you read the story, it's sad because you just, like, he constantly wakes up just not remembering the last 4 days of his life.
Yeah.
Like, I guess his first tour for Guns N' Roses was, Guns N' Roses during Appetite for Destruction. They were kind of a cover, not a cover band. They were the
Opening
opening
band.
act. Yeah, they were the opening act for a bunch of big name artists. And so he spent the first 2 years from age 21 to 23 basically drunk and stoned every night, all day, every night, just partying. And then he'd, get up, do the show, play, and then he'd drink all night. Then he'd wake up and put hair on the dog and drink and do, drugs. And then and
Yeah.
he'd travel all over the world.
But at the same point, this is also the guy, mind you, that has some of the most memorable and iconic guitar riffs of all time. You can't tell me when you don't hear "Welcome to the Jungle," "Sweet Child of Mine," that you don't think, "Oh yeah, that's Slash." I mean, he's up there with Eddie Van Halen as far as drug use uh, and guitar playing. Those guys are generational talents.
So, so the question then becomes, how come he can make his life a success, but so many other people cannot? What is
Well,
it
I think a
about
lot of it
his
comes.
what is it about his character that he could be successful and make something out of his life that most people that follow that same path, we would probably say that the majority of people will not do that?
I would say it's opportunity, right circumstances, right place, right time. I mean, that's what it comes down to a lot of the times is, you know, not everybody can fall into the luck that Slash did by being in Guns N' Roses and then leaving that and starting Slash's Snake Pit and then Velvet Revolver and then coming back to Guns N' Roses. I mean, when you have that kind of talent, you can do things like that. And I'm not saying a lot of these other guitarists don't have talent, but everyone's got a different path, and his willingness and situation put him in a position to be a part of the band that was able to do this. Because for every Slash of Guns N' Roses that you have Dave Mustaine of Metallica, who is drunkenly woken up and put on a bus and shipped out and fired from the band. Granted, he recovered and started Megadeth, but his start was not conducive to a strong finish.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like that. I've always been fascinated that how much of uh, the magic of the artistry of the songs are written because you're totally jacked up. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
you try to do that sober, that doesn't happen, or your creative juices don't come to fruition when you're just sober, like, hey, I want to write this song. but most of the greatest songs that are out there, has some sort of drug and helper to create it.
And I'm assuming it's the ambidexterity of your fingers to just not care and not be thinking, to be able to create some of those. I'm sure that helps too. It's kind of like if you have a couple shots before you start talking on a microphone, you feel a little bit looser.
Yeah, he did say too. He said that one of the things that when he was coming up as a young guitar player, is that he would listen to the music to try to learn the riff, but he never tried. Like he would listen. He mentioned Eddie Van Halen. I never tried to be Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah,
That everything I learned how to play the guitar by listening to Eddie Van Halen, but I also was aware and recognized that there is only one Eddie Van Halen, and that's why there's only going to be one Slash, because I play. You can play the notes, but it's how you play it and how his relationship with the guitar that makes Slash different than just someone who just can pluck the notes like everyone else.
And I think that's what separates him from the rest of the pack, is he, at an early age, recognized that there's only one Eddie Van Halen, and everyone else is trying to be him. But why be someone that's already there when you can be your own person and be your own guitarist? And I can argue that, there's very few guitarists out there in the music world, in the history of rock and roll, that you can hear the opening guitar riff and tell right away who it is. But I guarantee more times than not, it's going to be Slash or it's going to be Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, and even with all the drugs and the path of his path, you can tell in his writing that he did see the world a little differently than just a drug, over drugged musician. Like
Well,
there was something about him that was he saw life differently. His attitude about his life was very raw, like very open.
now, was he dyslexic or illiterate? I seem to remember thinking he was one of the other.
Oh, okay. I've read about a little over half the book. He did not mention anything with his learning. He just said that other than music theory, he just didn't like school. He just did
Oh.
not like school. He didn't like. He was a waste of his time. He was bored with it, and so he never caught on to it. In fact, when he was 15 years old, I guess he tried to take the equivalency exam so that he could just stop going to school, and obviously he didn't pass, but he just wanted to play guitar. He said for whatever reason, I guess he had his parents came from a split home, and uh,
Oh.
the father kind of went into a lot of drinking, and the mom was gone all the time, and she worked in the industry, so she met a lot of famous artists and musicians. So he saw, as a young boy, he saw a lot of the musicians doing drugs and stuff, and he just said that the guitar was the only way that I could push out my emotions. Everything else is breaking shit and stealing.
So,
So,
so this brings up a question that I always like to ask people, and it always, to me, is very telling about a person. So, if you could take the talents of any guitarist in any point in time in the history of rock and roll, Buddy Holly, Jimi Hendrix, Slash, Eddie Van Halen, John Mayer, whose talents would you take to make your own, to build your own career? Like, if you could play like somebody, who would you emulate?
yeah, mine is pretty easy, but I don't. I'm not a big into rock, but James Taylor was my.
Yeah.
He was his music was the musician that inspired me to learn how to play guitar.
Yeah.
Was listening to James Taylor. I like the storytelling of James Taylor, probably the same way as I would like the storytelling of Jim Croce or some of those other
Yeah.
artists. I was never I never was a pounder of, I just want to hear the beat and just, even though I totally admire, like I started listening. That's one thing too. I started reading the book, and he was reading some of the stories about, Sweet Child of Mine and Night Train, and so I started listening to those songs again, and I haven't heard some of those songs in 20 years, man, 25 years, and just remembered like Sweet Child of Mine, that guitar
That
intro.
opening riff on Sweet Child
Oh
of
my
Mine, just,
gosh,
it's
yeah.
legendary.
Oh heck yeah.
You know,
And I
you
mean,
know,
Night Train. If you hear that one, you can just, when you
yeah.
hear it, it's like, oh yeah, that's Slash. I mean, you can just totally hear it. So that's been kind of good. But I was James Taylor. So how about you? Who are you a big fan of?
I was a big fan of a lot of them. Like I am a big fan of Slash. I'm a big fan of the stuff he did with Miles Kennedy of Alter Bridge. Um, as an independent artist a few years back, I really enjoy the riffs he creates. If I had to be like somebody, I would probably either pick Chris Stapleton or Zach Myers.
Okay, I know
Zach
Chris
Myers of the band.
Stapleton.
Chris Stapleton, obviously the country singer
Yeah,
songwriter,
right.
very good guitar player. But Zach Myers is the lead guitarist for a little band called Shinedown.
Oh, Shinedown. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. I'm
he
not as familiar
plays.
with them, but yeah.
Yeah, he plays very well too. But a lot of his inspiration comes from Slash and all these guys too, from growing up because we're roughly the same age. So you can't tell me you don't hear "Welcome to the Jungle" in any sporting event or situation, and if the hair on your arms doesn't stand up a little bit and you get a little bit amped, I don't think you really appreciate what that song can do and speak to you as.
That whole album though, I started listening to that whole album
It's a
again,
great
and
album.
that Appetite for Destruction, there were so many good songs on that album. And he was saying it's like it didn't take us very long to write that album. Like that's how connected the band was. Is within a matter of months, all of those songs were written and ready to go, and they were all just really good songs. And
Well,
and
and that came out of the middle of the glam rock era, where you had guitarists like Mick Mars from Motley Crue or CC DeVille from Poison. That these guys aren't rock gods, but they're definitely up there in the upper echelon of generational talents.
Yeah, and he talked about that. What I was surprised at too is how much these bands did not like each other. Like I guess he went on they went on tour with they opened for Poison at a couple local gigs, and they just said we hate them. We just hated them.
Yeah.
They just were not the band. I mean, we thought they were just some glamour rock, and then they opened for Motley Crue, and Motley Crue was a little bit nicer to them, but they kind of threw it in their face that they were the successful ones, and Guns N' Roses was just the little known band. And I
Yeah.
thought, man, you'd have thought that they all got along together, but he said the only tour that we went on where we were the opening act and we really liked being on the tour with them was Alice Cooper.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, they
I think
said that
Alice
Alice
Cooper's just
was
cool with
just one of
everybody.
these nice guys. He just let us be who we were, and and they were they were unapologetic. I mean, yeah, this is who we are. We're gonna trash your hotel room. We're gonna trash everything about your hotel, and we don't care. And if you don't like it, then
That's a
we'll
rock star thing though, because if you watched Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen story,
yeah.
I think they touched on that, and there's also the Motley Crue story on Netflix. I think it's called like Dirt Sheets or The Dirt. It's a Netflix original. But if you haven't seen that one, that's worth checking out too, because that's the story of how Motley Crue came up through all this and got their fame. And I think they've got a very parallel comeuppance, just like Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Because they're same Los Angeles club scene, touring style of music. Seemed to have a bit more longevity because I don't think they broke up as many times as Axl Rose tried to finish the Chinese Democracy album.
I will say this: he does not talk about Axl Rose as admiringly as I would have thought.
Oh, I don't think they liked each other. I think
Yeah, like I mean, I think that they stood each other because of the greatness of the music they were creating, but I don't think that overall, I think Axl Rose was very aloof to the rest of the band. Like and when he mentions them almost like, well, Axl did this, and it was almost like he wouldn't say, "Oh, my buddy got in a fight." It was all like Axl Rose got in a fight with some guy and broke a beer bottle over his head. It was very strange.
that makes a lot of sense too, because if you paid attention to every time Guns N' Roses was gonna tour over the last 20 years, because it's been 30 plus years since Appetite for Destruction came out and the Use Your Illusion album. So I think it was probably the mid 2000s when they started going to tour again. They were chronically 2.5 to 3 hours late getting on the stage for every show because of Axl Rose.
Yeah, he made it sound like there was a couple times where Axl Rose just would not leave his hotel room,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and
it's
that's
like, wow, dude, I mean, that's pretty that's
and,
pretty
you know,
weird.
unfortunately, when you have one person like that that's so instrumental to what you're trying to do, it hurts the reputation of the band. Like I would love to see Guns N' Roses, but because of that past reputation of Axl's, I'm very hesitant to spend the money because I don't have all night to wait for him to decide if he wants to sing or not.
Well, I will say this. I mean, I haven't gotten to the end of the book, and this book was written probably 15 years ago, so it's an older book. But
Well, they are touring again together,
yeah,
so
and I saw that actually at Legion Stadium they had the sign when we went to the tour over there that they're going to be playing at Allegiant Stadium, so
yeah,
they're
yeah.
coming back. But
I think when you get to a certain point in your life, because these guys are probably mid-50s now, a little bit older than you.
yeah,
I
he's about 55, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
I think age mellows a lot of those tensions and anxieties, and the quest to play one more time and recapture those moments uh, is bigger than their egos in some cases. Whether it's true or not in this case, I don't know. But how many bands have we seen that were not together for years, like the Eagles, even Motley Crue, reunite to go on endless tours? You know.
yeah. Well, and I'm sure that I mean, let's be honest, money probably has something to do with it.
Oh yeah, money always talks.
When they say, "Oh, well, we'll pay you millions of dollars to go back on tour," yeah, I don't really like those guys. You have millions of dollars? Oh, sure, yeah, we'll go. We'll go. That
Yeah.
sounds good. That
Well, you know,
sounds good.
before COVID hit, how many guys were going on their farewell tours, and ticket prices were $250 a pop for shows, venues like Allegiant Stadium or Chase Field down in Phoenix. I know we're going to go see Elton John on another one of his farewell tours, the continuation, the one from 2019 that got held up by 2020, and I think that's not till November of. It's costing us $300 a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
So
Exactly.
that's just one man. That's a one-man show versus a 4 or 5 piece band.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
You know,
The ultimate question though is, or at least not even a question, if he's not on drugs, if they're not doing heavy drinking and partying, do they even create appetite for destruction?
I
I
think
mean, is that even a possibility without the drug use? We talk about bad drug use, bad, and yet when you create an album like that, would it even be possible if you were not in
I
that? I
agree.
mean, the what it's like. Remember the first Kowalska Fest we went to?
Yeah,
It was such a powerful. Even Demon was talking about that. It was such an awesome event, and we had such a good time. And the subsequent years, we were never able to quite
capture the magic.
capture that magic. And we tried. We got more people to come, and we always tried, but we never caught the magic of that first Kowalska Fest. And maybe it's like these artists. I mean, you capture the magic in a bottle, but it's hard to replicate. You can't
Yeah,
just make it again.
like I said, opportunity, right place, right time. These things don't
Yeah.
happen unless the stars align.
Yeah.
But as we get to the end of the show today, if you have a Mount Rushmore of guitarists, or if there's a guitarist that you think you'd like to be if you could play the guitar, or emulate if you could play the guitar, we want to hear about it. Post a picture of them, or just tell us. Hit us up on our social medias at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Liquid Carnage. If there's a show you'd like our EP Tom to see up in Denver, hit him up at liquid_EP on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome. I I'm enjoying the book, and I would recommend it to you. Maybe I'll ask Dave if I don't know if you read still, but if you want to read it,
No,
it's just fascinating.
I just
I
color now.
mean,
That's fine.
I think the other thing too is how much he accomplished in the first 23 years of his life,
Yeah.
considering the path that he was on. I mean, he saw the world. Let's be honest, he probably had sex with every single porn star out there. I mean, this guy was a beast.
Well, speaking of which, if you want, I will give you the Jenna Jameson biography next, and you can read that. That's pretty entertaining too.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so well, thanks for what it's almost like now after this podcast, I want to call it the Taliban and Slash, baby, or Slash and the Taliban, baby. to
Whatever
be
you find,
cool.
whatever you find it best, just don't get us flagged and put us on one of those watch lists.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I'll be careful then.
Yeah. With that being said, take us home.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you. If there is a delay and we aren't able to post it on Thursday, we'll definitely have it on Monday.
I will let you know
So
if that's the case. Trust me,
yes,
check our social medias.
yes, we will. So thanks for listening, everybody. That was Scott. I'm Jason. And as always, if you never know quite what to say, just have yourself some liquid courage.